Fight & Rage is a fairly new indie game that caught my attention on Steam recently. I wonder why. It's a 90s arcade-style beat-em-up with up to 3 players at once where your goal is to smash everything in sight, stay alive, and get to the final boss. An age-old but time-tested premise. If you ever wanted to punch something in the face without any legal or moral repercussions, well, I'd recommend a therapist, but this may be a good second pick. And as far as I can tell, this is yet another project to be made by one guy, Sebastian Garcia of SebaGamesDev. My experience with the beat-em-up genre is actually quite limited. I played the heck out of the TMNT games when I was younger, hoarding Raphael until I was cold and afraid, but outside of that, I'm a blank slate. So while I was very intrigued by the marketing, I was unsure how much I would truly enjoy the game due to my lack of exposure. Well, after 90+ hours of total playtime, I think that answer is pretty clear. From the bountiful reviews I've read, it would appear that Fight & Rage, however small of a following it has right now, is considered to be one of the best beat-em-ups on the market, if not of all time. And I know tacking of all time onto something can sound presumptuous, but I don't think it's unwarranted here. This is a hidden gem in every sense of the wording. So much personality is emanating from this small $20 package with tons of nuance and polish throughout. Right from the word go, there's this assault on your senses with a rapturous title card full of bright lights, colors, and a bangin' soundtrack. And it doesn't stop there. This is one of the most visually expressive 2D games I've played recently. The lighting in particular is incredibly well done. Effects like fire, lightning, and raindrops are practically tangible. Character sprites and animations look seamless while in motion or at a standstill, and the color palette speaks for itself. Sunsets, torchlit alleys, beaches, a casino, prison. If I had one gripe, it would be that a majority of the game does lean a bit on the dark side, almost always taking place at night or indoors. And while it does complement the apocalyptic tone, it can make some areas blend together and look kind of muddy. Is that a monkey wearing a jacket? But no matter how you slice it, the game is simply a spectacle for the eyes. The way everything flows and moves and bounces. Oh yeah, I should probably talk about that now. Yes, the women in this game have rather pronounced assets, and depending on the type of person you are, this will either not bother you in the slightest, or you'll roll your eyes every time you see it. I mean, just look at the character select screen. Where are my pants? It's a really easy thing to poke fun at if you aren't one to, at the very least, tolerate fan service. So make that what you will. Testosterone aside, where Fight & Rage shines brightest is in the complexity of its combat. The one trap that so many genres can fall into, be it a fighting game, hack and slash, beat 'em up RPG, lawn care, is the trap of button mashing. Whether your game is so easy that you can spam the same attack over and over, or the combat is so shallow that you only have one attack to spam. This is my life. And while yes, there are those 2 or 3 combos that you'll rely on for most of your playtime, there is so much more you can do here than meets the eye. Not only does hitting things just feel good because of the impact sounds and particle effects, but there are tons of different moves and combos to keep you busy across the 3 main characters. First, we have Gal, the fastest and technically weakest, but her agility and combo potential is massive and is what makes her my go-to. Then there's F. Norris, and yes, his first name is exactly what you're thinking. He's an old ninja who plays similar to Gal, but strings together attacks a little differently. Can't quite put my finger on what makes them so different, but believe me, when you play it, you'll feel it. And then we have Ricardo. Whoa! The complete opposite of both. He's slow, heavy, can't even run, but his reliance on grabs, throws, uppercuts, and having double the damage makes him a powerhouse. In other words, I'm terrible at him. I'm not gonna go into painstaking detail of how to chain all these combos together, because I don't know how, but with such a wide selection, you have a lot of room for experimentation and opportunities to really grow as a player if you're willing to put in the time. Or you can die. There's even a training mode that explicitly teaches you all of these essential combos. So if you're not getting the hang of it on your own, you can learn basically everything about your favorite character in just a few minutes. And I guarantee your enjoyment will skyrocket. I'll be blunt, my initial impressions after my first playthrough were pretty average. It wasn't until I really learned how to play the game, so to speak, that it climbed its way into my top indie games. The only problem is that the game doesn't tell you about this mode at all. It's not even unlocked until you play arcade at least once and go buy it with 30 coins. I'm all for not shoving a convoluted tutorial down the player's throat, but the mere existence of the training mode could have been made a lot more apparent. Like a small prompt appearing when you get a game over telling you that you can practice there anytime. Or better yet, how about the built-in tutorial that plays in arcade tells you about it? That would make the most sense. Because I played through the entire game on my first go without even knowing how to block attacks. A really basic function that made enemies like the Doberman, or as I call them, the Antichrist, way more frustrating than they needed to be. So I definitely think some more clarity could have been made on that. Also, kind of a side note, but I wish there was a designated button for running. I get that they didn't have that in the arcades, but you have to double tap the D-pad in a direction to sprint, and that can get fairly clunky, at least for me. I would have liked to at least have the option to map running to either L or R, or any button for that matter, so I wouldn't have to keep double tapping my thumb all the time. Regardless, once I unlocked the training mode and got to practicing, the game seriously opened up. What I think really ties the whole system together is the special meter and parrying. Your SP bar is always filling up automatically in the corner. When it's full, you can activate a special move, which usually allows you to chain more combos together while also being temporarily invulnerable. But you can still activate a special even when the meter is empty, it'll just cost you some health, creating this risk-reward relationship of sacrificing HP for DPS, giving you near total control over when a special can be used, adding a layer of strategy and rewarding you for maintaining a high HP count. Not that this has never been done before, but it's still worth crediting. On top of that, parrying is arguably the best move you can master. If you tap the D-pad in the direction that you're about to take damage, you will block that attack and instantly fill up your special meter, further adding to said DPS. But you can't spam the button. It has to be a single press at the right moment, or else it won't work. And that's what makes it so challenging, but also balanced and rewarding to pull off. If you can master it, you will become an unstoppable machine of constant special moves, evading every attack thrown your way, and it's 100% earned. Hands down, the best feeling in this game is burrowing through a massive horde of enemies in seconds without even getting hit. However, taking hold of that feeling won't come so easily. You may get the occasional power-up that lets you go wild for a short duration, or juggle enemies up against a conveniently placed wall, but Fight and Rage is a very challenging experience, even on the normal difficulty. As early as the Stage 2 boss, I was already getting game overs, at least on single player. You'll undoubtedly have an easier time in 2 or 3 player co-op. Imagine it can be a lot more fun too, but it's still a rigorous journey. It's unfortunate that there's no online multiplayer support outside of Steam's Remote Play. I understand that he may not have had the resources for it, but I seriously hope it gets added in at some point because it would do wonders for the game's sales. In any case, I do believe the difficulty is pretty much right where it needs to be. There are a couple of spikes here and there, and not every enemy attack is telegraphed the best. These combo breaking rat jabs can suck me. But generally speaking, there's a really good flow here from easy to hard. There are no instant kill hazards. Health drops are placed right where you'd expect them to be, either before a boss or after a long stretch. Every 50,000 points earns you a 1-up. Anytime you die, you'll respawn right at that spot back at full health, and if you lose all your lives, you'll restart from the last checkpoint, which is always after the most recent screen transition. So you'll never have to play an entire stage on 1 credit. I've actually read a handful of reviews that have criticized the checkpoints in this game for being unfair, and to each his own, but I can't relate. It's true that there are a few long segments towards the end that you have to complete in one go, but that's part of why they're so challenging. Being able to survive that many back-to-back encounters without dying a bunch takes effort, and is why winning feels so good. Make it too forgiving, and it's not much of an accomplishment. We all have different thresholds for what is too hard or too easy, of course, but for me, I had no problems here. Except for the raft level. Dear God, what a beginner's nightmare. This is something that many other reviews have also pointed out as a blatant spike in difficulty, and I have to agree on this one. The level itself is fine, I really dig the concept, the music is incredible, and the background is gorgeous, but it's a huge contrast from how the rest of the game is played, and is going to get a lot of players killed because of it. There are 2 water pits on each side, and every time you fall in, you lose 1/3 of your HP. So if you get knocked back or do a running jump too far, you're going in. Now it's a 3-hit KO. Everybody dies here. The sudden shift from the freeform experimental gameplay that you've gotten used to a far more defensive and constrained one is going to catch players off guard and most certainly cause a chain of game overs, as it has. That's precisely what happened to me, and I know I'm not alone in that. Oh yeah, jump kick. No! If this was an alternate stage that was hard to reach, it would be excusable, but because it's on the main path more or less, it's so easy for new players to get railroaded by it. It is after the halfway point at least, but he could have lowered the damage to be a little less jarring. Thankfully, this is the exception and not the rule. On the whole, I think the difficulty is handled brilliantly. Perhaps the game's biggest strength is its ability to condition the player to become better through gameplay. Every time you get beaten down, you learn something. You understand enemy and boss patterns a little better. Your parry timing is more accurate. You start using new combos in more optimized ways. There is no better gratification than when you look back at when you started and realize that you're running circles around the stuff that used to give you a hard time. You truly feel yourself becoming better the more that you play. But you gotta be proactive about it. If you're not the kind of player who cares to learn new attacks and go out of your way to try more advanced combinations, then you're gonna be missing out on most of what Fight and Rage has to offer. And that can be a double-edged sword. Aside from the learning curve, there is one major deterrent for casual players. Since the combat is 100% the main focus here, stage designs take quite the back seat. Environments are stunning to look at, but there's not much to do in each area besides beat up bad guys. And yeah, I know that's kind of the whole point, but even when looking at just a few minutes of old TMNT footage, I realized how much more alive the stages were. Tons of hazards unique to a given location that were always changing to keep you interested. Be it a background element, a snazzy boss intro, or a change in perspective. You were fighting the level almost as much as the enemies themselves. But here, the levels are more like arenas that house your battles. Occasionally, you might get something like the truck where you can fling bosses off, the bike and surfing minigame, or even the raft level. For as much flack as I give it, it still stands out. But so much of Fight and Rage feels like the same linear hallway with a different coat of paint. I would have liked to see more dynamic stages to shake things up. I think it would improve the appeal for all levels of play. The forest level is without a doubt the biggest offender in this regard. It's like 5 straight minutes of moving right, fighting the same wolves and snazzy apes over and over, and why is the pig's name Elsa? So, in the event of a potential sequel or patch update, I would take that into consideration. But as I've made it very clear by now, the game is still a blast to play, even when taking that into account. And as if that wasn't enough, Sebastian decided to go the extra mile and include tons of bonus content. If the main game wasn't enough to satisfy you, then you're in for a treat. You see, every time you win or lose in arcade mode, you're awarded a certain number of coins for how many points you had. And you can use these coins to purchase things in the extras menu. Like I said, we have the training mode, but also stage practice, versus battle, time attack, score attack, survival, CPU partners to help you in arcade, a mode that lets you control all 3 characters simultaneously, alternate difficulties, both easier and harder, but mostly harder, a turbo speed option that increases the speed of the entire game. In fact, this whole video has been done on the turbo setting, as I can no longer play without it. You can even unlock the enemies and bosses as playable characters in these bonus modes. You can't play as them in arcade, sadly, and their attacks are really basic. Some of them only have 1 or 2 moves, but I completely understand why it would be asking too much for one guy to program 28 unique movesets and dialogue interactions into an hour-long campaign, so I can live with that. My favorite feature by far, though, are the alternate costumes. I love when games do this, and I'm so happy to say that most of them look really good. I think Gal has the best by far, with some really nice color combos and apparel changes, but F. Norris has a lot of cool ninja outfits as well, and Ricardo's not far behind. Although a lot of them do play it kinda safe. I'd say about 70% of these are just palette swaps, only changing the colors and maybe 1 accessory. I would have loved to see more extravagant wardrobe choices, something exciting and over the top. Especially because the requirements to unlock some of these are taxing, to say the least. Getting an S rank in score attack may not sound like much, but it changed me. If you plan on 100%ing this game, which I still haven't done, then Fight and Rage will wear its name on its sleeve. One of the hardest things I've had to do so far was beat the game on the hardest difficulty, as Ricardo, my worst character. This final boss took me 8 hours to beat. I can't even tell you the stress. So many times you'd be right at the end. Final boss, almost dead, just kill him, 1 more hit, no! Ah! Anyway, so the point is, some of these costumes did not feel worth the effort that went into getting them. Oh, I see you busted a hole in your wall trying to get this S rank. Here's a green suit. You can always read the criteria on how to unlock something beforehand, which is really convenient, but you can't actually see what the costumes look like until they're unlocked. Of course, there's nothing stopping you from looking these up online or just not unlocking them, but still, it would have been better if we could preview the skins before going through all that trouble. I like the element of surprise, believe me, but sometimes my suffering was not validated. But if that's still not enough content for you, buckle up, because the main campaign's got you covered. Fight and Rage is sporting, you guessed it, multiple endings. 8 different endings to be exact, across all 7 character combinations, which, on a technicality, totals to 56 alternate storylines. I never thought Shadow the Hedgehog would have competition. As I'm sure you can already imagine, yes, this is a bit overkill. About 80% of these endings are effectively unnecessary. After the main 8, heck even 4, you've pretty much got the gist of it. It's cool to see the unique dialogue interactions depending on the character, but it's not exactly essential. You're not expected to try and get all of these. Okay, you know what I mean. They're only here to make your 20th or so playthrough somewhat different to help reduce monotony. But if you're playing a game that many times anyway, it must be pretty good, right? That being said, one of my favorite aspects of the entire game, and what really sold me on it, were the alternate stages. At various points throughout the story, you'll be met with a choice, and depending on your decision, you'll be taken to a different level that will change the course of your adventure, giving you a different ending. There aren't that many of them, and they all converge at a common point, but it was still really exciting to play through a stage one way, and then discover a completely new one the second time around. It added a huge incentive to play through the game multiple times, and when you combine that with all the coins you'll be earning and the costumes you'll buy to make you want to play even more, you can see how well everything ties together. It's a grind worth grinding for. The story wasn't too shabby either. It's rather vague in what it tells you, and there's a handful of grammatical errors, but it was entertaining no less. I genuinely want to see it continue. Surprisingly dark too. It's not exactly a cheery tale, but I dug it. The soundtrack was also a point of highlight. The composer, Gonzalo Varela, is a talent in every sense. This is a 43-track beast of an OST. You don't get that very often in these indie projects. It's primarily electric guitar, hooray for me, but there's also classical, acoustic, piano, electronic, bass, and even some orchestral pieces. There's some seriously good stuff here. Unfortunately, I do have one gripe with the music when it comes to the mixing. The guitar tone in particular is a bit on the unruly side. It's kind of squealy, a bit harsh on my ears anyway. Kind of sounds like the guitar is slightly out of tune in parts, which sometimes is an effect of over-distortion. Or it could just be his tone. Maybe that's his style and it just doesn't quite resonate with me. If that's the case, I'm not going to tell the artist how to do his job, of course, but I did feel like I should mention that. In any case, I think it goes without saying that I think very highly of this game. When taking everything into account, the high skill ceiling, deep combat system, gorgeous graphics and music, plethora of bonus content, and the undeniable effort that went into making it all, we have a game that I can easily say is worth buying at full price. There are a few snags, as with any game. The raft level difficulty spiked, a clunky double tap to run, a lack of stage interaction, some telegraphing and animations could be improved, the necessity of the training mode not being made clear, and the quick save feature, which I haven't even mentioned yet, is pretty poorly communicated. If you quit a stage and then come back, it'll ask if you want to continue, but if you quit the same stage a second time, the quick save will be deleted and you'll have to start from scratch. So you can only quit the game and come back to a stage once. But if you progress and make it to the next stage, a new quick save is written. So now you can quit that one time and come back. It's encouraging you to play the game in one sitting like an authentic arcade experience, but this is a home console at the end of the day, so I don't think it makes sense to limit players like that. But the fact of the matter is, I had a blast with Fight and Rage, and can easily recommend it to you if you're marginally interested. You can wait for a sale if you want to, anything over 50% off is a steal, or you can skip it if it's not your thing, but I know I don't regret my purchase. That all being said, thank you guys so much for watching, and as always, don't forget to check out the next episode whenever I post it, which will probably be soon. Alright? See ya. Wait, she said it!